The topic of abortion is no doubt one of the most contentious debates of our age. In these two episodes, we're each going to take in the facts and lay out our views regarding abortion. Hey, I'm Bailey.
I'm Michael.
And I'm David.
And welcome back to the Facing the Gates podcast. This is part 2 of our discussion on the topic of abortion. Obviously, if you can't read, it's okay. Some of us can't read. You might want to go check out the first part of this, because that's kind of relevant to the discussion. But yeah, we kind of wrap up our conclusions, and we have a lot to talk about. So let's get to it. Now, I want to go into one last section before we talk about the implications and hopefully solutions to this issue. And that is Planned Parenthood. So, to start out, here are some interesting facts and statistics about Planned Parenthood. They kill one child every 89 seconds, disproportionately kill babies based on sex and ethnicity, commit 133 abortions for every one adoption referral, aid human traffickers and child rapists, and were founded by a racist eager to eliminate black babies.
Quick question on the, and this isn't me saying yay or nay to it, but on the child rapists and traffickers, what is the data and source from that?
Okay, so I'm actually going to kind of go more into essentially that was my thesis, and now I'm going to give you the more specifics of those things. So, just as a brief history lesson, Planned Parenthood began in 1916 with its founder, Margaret Sanger, as a birth control clinic in New York. Margaret held 3 important philosophies, which are still held by the company today. So, number 1 is the approval of all uninhibited sexual activity. She believed that anyone of any age should be able to have sex with anyone they want, regardless if they were married to that person, someone else, or no one else. The second principle she held was that small families are better than large families. Margaret grew up with 10 siblings. Her mother died of tuberculosis, but Margaret blamed her death on having too many children. So she spent the rest of her life advocating for a smaller family size. And for reference to Margaret, a large family is one with more than 2 children. Now, we can see that these first 2 philosophies are very much alive in American society today, as they are practically the gospel to many people. The problem is they're both contradictory. You can't have lots of uninhibited sex and also have a small family, especially in the early 1900s. So that leads us to the third philosophy that Margaret Sanger held. She also believed in the purification of race through selective breeding. She believed that mentally handicapped individuals, or people she deemed, quote, feeble-minded, should not be allowed to have children at all. She advocated for birthing license, which people would be required to have if they intended to give birth. Now, this last part obviously didn't take off in America, but it did in China. Up until very recently, in China, you were only allowed to have one child, but if you're going to have a child, you need a birthing license. She also believed that people of, quote, dysgenic stock should be given their choice of sterilization or be confined to a farm for the rest of their lives, end quote. Now, of course, eugenics got a bad name after World War II, so she eventually backed off these positions. Advocates for abortion, such as Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi, have received the highest reward from Planned Parenthood, the Margaret Sanger Award. Obviously, there's more I have to go into about this, but I'll let you guys respond if you have anything.
No.
Yeah. Though, with her kind of the first philosophy about being able to have sex and not have as many kids, I mean, condoms have been around since like 1850s. So it was possible. And then there's other ancient forms of birth control that are highly ineffective, but still more effective than none.
Right.
So how that's worded sounds like in general,
they're
education levels there. Yeah.
If you just go have sex with a different person every night, or the same person every night, odds are at some point you statistically you are running that gamble. So that's kind of not feasible, even if you're using some form of protection, because at some point it's just a matter of time.
Not necessarily, because I mean I've known people that.
But you're still running the gamble is the point.
Yeah, you're taking the chance, but the chance, well, nowadays it's even less, but back then, a little bit higher. I mean, there's people we know from like the 50s and 60s have no kids, but we know they do the deed, I guess you could say.
The whoopee, as they would put it. See,
Please
me,
don't say that.
I just want a vasectomy, man. Make it easy to get vasectomies.
Though with her take on eugenics, and especially when it comes to, say, the mentally handicapped and stuff, unfortunately, that was kind of a more common ideal back then, because they just didn't take their time, plan resources, and actually get them to be the help and to be a functioning part of society.
Well, if you recall, being that these are the founding philosophies of this company, that has actually still survived to this day, because we see that, as I mentioned earlier, a large majority of the people that do get abortions are Black women. I won't say a majority, but a large chunk of people.
So that falls more on the economical, cultural issues there, and my standpoint with the problem with abortions.
Yeah, because the same could be said for a lot of companies and that have survived to the day.
Yeah.
You cut out for part of that. What'd you say, Michael?
I said the same could be said for a ton of companies still today that are standing. Disney believed in very similar ties to the Nazi beliefs. Henry Ford himself, a Ford Motor Company, very similar anti-Semitic, eugenic-based beliefs. The same could be said for a lot of companies. And they've just backed off over years because that wasn't, that doesn't make fucking money.
Right. Well, I would disagree, but that's for reasons that I will say as I go forward, actually. So, that being said, through Planned Parenthood, minors are allowed to receive consultations, contraception, and in some states, abortion without parental consent. For reference, 40% of minors having an abortion report that neither of their parents knew about the abortion. 11 states do not enforce parental consent for minors seeking an abortion, while 17 states use public funds to pay for abortion. Roughly 14% of abortions are paid for with public funds. In 2014, 88,466 abortions in California were paid for with public funds, and 45,722 in New York were paid for with public funds. This means that your daughter can get pregnant, have an abortion, and you would be none the wiser. We know from developmental psychology that minors do not have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logical reasoning, and this is kind of something Michael mentioned earlier. This is why we typically don't allow minors to make these kinds of decisions on their own. I'll let you guys respond to that, and then I will. There's two other things I have to say about Planned Parenthood.
In a perfect world, kids won't be having sex, kids won't be getting pregnant, and they will have good families. Though from what I see, the reasoning behind that is because, like, a lot of kids that end up, say, early pregnancy, early sexual activity, there's a lot of, say, baggage from family issues, financial issues, stuff like that. So in a perfect world, it wouldn't exist. There'd be, say, counseling, parental consent, but I understand why it happens, because heck, when we were in high school, tons of
Yes.
teenagers, kids were having sex.
And
And
I thought you were talking
unfortunately,
about abortions, but also yes to that as well.
and
There
I
were some
mean,
people we went. This was actually probably after you guys left, but yeah, there were some people that were getting abortions as well. But I don't know if that was happening before you guys left or not.
I was so drugged out, I probably didn't give two shits about what was going on.
I mean, there was one person with
6.
almost more kids than I can count. 6 kids, which if you're
She dead
16 should not be happening.
Yeah.
But also we had kids that would have sex and believed that pulling out was an effective method of birth control.
It is not. And again, I think a lot of that goes down to, first, parents, talk to your fucking kids. Let them know how serious a child is. Don't sugarcoat that a baby's the greatest thing in the world. It can be, but it's a very, very difficult on-bringing. And there's only one way to make it. They don't just magically appear from the stork.
Yeah.
Educate your fucking kids.
This
Yeah.
kind of gets into my. Sorry, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah.
And second, if you are a person engaging in sexual activity, educate your fucking self. Third, how do you not know? I know some people don't show, but it's pretty obvious when someone gets pregnant. Like pretty quick. I've had a family member try to hide it, and it was really fucking obvious pretty fucking quick.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I will indulge in my currently evolving parenting philosophy, which is obviously barely existed at this point. But given one of the things that I'm about to bring up here and this specific issue, I am fully on board with educating your child about lots of things from an early age, including sex and the whole gambit of things that come under that umbrella. Obviously, age-appropriate discussions at certain ages so that they can understand and kind of compute things. Don't just, have a conversation that should be had with a 16-year-old with an 8-year-old because, you don't want to scar your child, or they're not going to understand everything. But bottom line
vice
is,
versa.
right, you need to, yes, very much so. You need to discuss these things just because of the way our culture is. You have to educate them at a young age. It used to be where you could just wait until they're of a certain age, but you have to start young. It's just inevitable, unfortunately.
And I mean, even back in the day, you can really put any modern time of America, kids are going to figure it out whether you tell them or not. So you need to fucking educate them so they don't make a lifelong mistake. Yeah,
so your child is going to be educated either way. It's the matter of who is going to do the educating. That, is it going to be the school that educates you? Is it going to be the culture? Is it going to be your parents? Is it going to be your church? You have to be the one to decide who's going to educate your child. And that ties into some of the other issues we're going to talk about in separate episodes. But there's a lot of things that are going on in the public schools now that you just have to be aware about to educate your children, because there's all kinds of...
I mean, heck, I've known, that's, say, one of the issues I have with the kind of abstinence movie is it's like, oh, just don't do this. Well, what about the bodily functions of my sexual organs? And even though I don't plan on it, in the future, when I do plan on it, what should I do for sexual health and stuff like that? Because unfortunately, the abstinence movement was like, oh, just don't have sex, but still needs to educate and give the, hey, here's why you shouldn't, here's possible issues, here's the other side's opinion, and here, and I mean, heck, I actually had, weirdly enough, for some reason it popped up with one of my coworkers, and she's like, yeah, my 4-year-old knows what their body does, why it does it, And in the future, it's going to lead to be easier to teach them about stuff like that without having it be weird. Oh yeah, you know what? I don't feel comfortable talking about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to normalize some things at a younger age than you would like to, just because it is uncomfortable, but it makes it easier to have those conversations later on. And anyway, that's a digression.
Yeah, in some ways, kids understand a lot more than people give them credit for, and in other ways, they don't.
Right.
Yeah, it's less uncomfortable to explain to your son or daughter sex than it is for them to come home and say, "Hey, mom, I'm having a baby." Which one's more uncomfortable? Let's be realistic here.
Fair enough.
First, if your son comes home and says, "I'm having a baby," you got to ask, "Are you pregnant or did you knock someone up?" Are you my son or my daughter?
Okay. So that was a digression, but we'll back on topic. My next thing about Planned Parenthood is some people don't know this, but Planned Parenthood and the ACLU also disputed the Communications Decency Act, which prevented pornography from hitting the internet. Now, if you've done any amount of research about the harms of pornography, you know that that porn is directly tied to sex trafficking because porn creates demand and profits off of abuse. Sex trafficking doesn't always involve kidnapping someone and locking them in a room somewhere. Legally speaking, sex trafficking is defined as, quote, a commercial sex act that is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age, end quote. And of these things, porn is rife with. But being that porn is in high demand, guess what crimes are also now encouraged? That's right, sex trafficking. All you have to do is look at all these lawsuits coming out against MindGeek, which is the parent company to most porn sites. There's also much more I could say about this issue, but I'll defer people to Fight the New Drug if they want to learn more about that. Back to Planned Parenthood, who fought alongside the ACLU to have internet porn legalized. Once you have porn normalized, casual sex is normalized, sex trafficking abounds, and where do victims of sex trafficking go when they get pregnant? You guessed it, Planned Parenthood. Essentially, they have created a business model that profits massively from the very abuse that they advocated for.
Yeah,
you guys can go.
Unfortunately,
I'm going to.
With
I'll let you.
The
go
history
first.
of civilization, the want for pornographic material has always been there. And it's kind of say like drugs, instead of having it being this shady little gray area group that does terrible things, make it more open, have proper laws and regulations for it. Because, I mean, as we know with very illegal materials, it's out there on the internet regardless if you want or not. There's movies on YouTube, which technically they're committing a felony. And even on, say, like Facebook, Twitter, there's videos of people getting their heads blown off. Do we want that on the internet? No. But kind of trying to say, oh, this is illegal, doesn't stop it from happening, and usually makes the situation work. Or so, say what the problem with porn industry and sex trafficking, I would say regulation and kind of breaking down those big conglomerates would do more good for the rights of people who actually want to work in the sex industry. Kind of like with the problem, the classic stereotype of the pimp and the prostitute.
The hoe.
Yeah.
It's the hoe.
Yeah,
David.
so for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to go super deep into that rabbit trail about porn because we could do a whole different episode on that if we wanted to, but I don't. I'm just going to defer people to Fight the New Drug and call it a day. But essentially, what I'm getting at wasn't should porn be legal or illegal. That's
they
not.
Got the people funding Planned Parenthood have their hands in too many pockets, essentially.
Yeah, they profited off of abuse that they advocated for, essentially.
But what is pornography? That is
Oh
the
boy.
question.
Here we go. Deep philosophical question.
Because
Internet porn is what I'm specifically talking about, because that's what the bill was addressing.
well, that could be a lot of. There's ancient paintings that are considered pornographic.
I'm
even though
talking
they
about
are,
internet porn.
Yeah.
Porn is always
But-
existed, I know. But I'm talking about with
But-
internet porn, it has made it much more common and accessible.
Well, I mean,
It's
I
always
know-
been accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you think we have VHSs? VHS tapes.
But you had to go to
one-
a store and look at a guy and be like, hey, I want this
No,
porn.
you didn't. You could just order it in the fucking mail and it'd be at your house in 2 days. They sent catalogs to people's houses.
But it wasn't as easy to get porn as it is to just Google on your phone something.
No,
What
it's
I'm
still
getting at is
relatively easy.
it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
the
everything's gotten easier to get, though.
yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Information.
Yeah.
Things against pornography have gotten just as easy to find, easier to find as it has been easier to find pornography. The issue isn't necessarily the pornography itself, it's the ecosystem around it. Because by putting a blanket ban on pornography, that would therefore just drive it to the underground, or it would blanket ban a lot of other things in art and literature and media. Because there's always been porn that's been easy to get.
Mhm.
It's just we are
Yeah.
so put in our modern sense of what's easy. But back in the day, to get a movie, you had to go to a store. To get anything, you had to go to a store. So by having to go to a store, it's just as easy then as it is now, because the level hasn't changed. It's in the same spots.
It was anonymous, or it is anonymous now. So that's part of it. You can do it without someone knowing versus having to go face down a clerk. So that,
Go to a different
you could
town
order-
and use cash.
You could order off
through
the
a
mail.
in a
That's
catalog.
anonymous. There's
Okay.
To your
PO boxes.
neighbor's address.
for the sake of brevity, because I don't
Yeah.
want to go down this whole rabbit trail, because I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
making an argument about whether or not porn should be legal or not.
Yeah.
Again, the simple case is that I'm making, I'm not going to overstep my case, essentially, is that they advocated for internet porn, which has increased sex trafficking, and they have profited off of sex trafficking. That's really all I'm saying. Which, I mean, look, we can debate this at some other time, and
Yeah.
that's fine. But just for the sake of what I'm saying, and with regard to Planned Parenthood, that's really the only case I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to say porn should be illegal or what would be the best way of reducing the harms of porn. That's not what I'm going for right here. If we want to talk about that at some point, we can.
Yeah.
But for the sake of this conversation, I'm just saying that Planned Parenthood has profited off of abuse. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move into my final point against Planned Parenthood. In 2015, independent journalist David DeLayden released an expose on Planned Parenthood consisting of 12 videos where it was discovered that Planned Parenthood was harvesting and selling body parts from the infants they had aborted. They also altered abortion procedures against several clients' knowledge in order to harvest body parts more effectively. This was not the first time these accusations have been made against Planned Parenthood, but it was the first time they were caught on video. Now, I'm not leaving this in the show notes, but if you want to look into it, just look up David DeLayden, Planned Parenthood, and you'll find it. Though, major trigger warning to anyone who looks these up. On top of the grotesque videos shown, the people performing these actions are inhumanely callous and without any sort of compassion in the way they are nonchalantly discussing cutting up infant humans and selling them for research, all while the pieces of an unborn fetus are strewn upon the counter. Let me be clear, this is the most evil and disgusting thing I have ever seen in my life. Pro-lifers of all stripes came out after these videos were released, many of whom had never stood up against abortion in such a vocal way. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris led a raid by the FBI on DeLayden's apartment after this expose came to light. Now, just in conclusion of this whole little segment, if you think that's bad, just check out the work done by Live Action. Planned Parenthood is guilty of covering up child sex trafficking, accepting donations specifically to abort Black people, committing sex-selective abortions, and much more. Of course, trigger warning to anyone who looks into this. In my eyes, they are the most evil corporation on Earth.
Though,
real quick, because I know of the video you're talking about.
yeah.
Did you guys... Oh, you have?
Yes, I've looked into this a lot. They did not explicitly state that those parts were being sold. That money was reimbursement for transferring of materials through looking at the documents, and a grand jury failed to indict Planned Parenthood on that, which means there was not enough culpable evidence to bring forth a conviction based on that. That doesn't mean yes, no, maybe so, but that is just fact. Because they were brought up in Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Massachusetts, Michigan, Missouri, Nevada, Ohio, Pennsylvania, South Dakota, Washington. And there were still, at the time that I last looked into it, 2 more investigations ongoing. They were not indicted on a federal jury from the Supreme Court, which at that time was a Republican-based court.
Well, this one's I may have missed this state when you mentioned it, but this one was specifically in California.
Okay, well, this is looking into the whole thing as a whole, because those videos were brought up, and since they are first partially formerly federally funded, I'm not sure of their current status. I know they're a nonprofit, and due to them having many
I don't know about federal, but I do know they're funded by certain states, and it's kind of shaky whether or not they're funded federally. Yeah. They try, if they are, they try and dodge it, but if they, there's a case either way. Yeah, it's kind of not clear.
I know in 2019 they denied 90 million, or maybe not million, but 90, a big number that we'll never see in funding. But since they are a multi-state and they're technically interstate commerce, since they do have places outside of borders, they can be brought up in a Supreme Court, and then it can be investigated on a federal level too, which was not conclusive in the investigation. Now, I'm not saying they're good company, but just that one thing, because I remember when that happened, and then it was brought forth in litigation.
Yeah, and then there's questions since the one of the pictures matches up with a picture of a stillborn. So with that, I mean, do your own research.
Yeah,
if you have the stones, look up the videos. I will say, and obviously, again,
if you're not okay with seeing dead shit, don't.
Yeah, and unfortunately, with this situation, there's not a really unbiased view to look at through, because anybody reporting on it has their own biases with this.
Yeah, because I remember it was a big call.
Of course, but the videos speak for themselves, in my opinion.
Yeah, though
doctored videos can speak for themselves too. Is the issue.
The what now?
With the year it's in, and as I said, with one of the pictures of a fetus matched up with a picture of a stillborn. Now, is it possible they look similar? Yes, but unfortunately, nowadays, video evidence is not necessarily 100%
culpable.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that there's potential that they doctored the video.
Yes, but that can be say with any new
on either side.
Yeah, on any side of any news, any video nowadays, it's with the know-how you can doctor.
Yeah, they have doctored videos make it look like people were places they weren't.
Yeah,
slippery.
I will defer this to the people to determine whether or not this video was deep faked, but I don't think it was.
And note, I'm not saying it was or wasn't, but that's one thing is I know the federal justification of that, and then also the both sides saying it was doctored, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Do your
it
research. If
murkies
you
the
have the
water.
stomach, watch the video. If you don't have the stomach, you don't have to watch the video.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because either way, there's a dead baby, whether it's doctored or not. It's a dead baby.
Right.
Yeah, because like real quick, I mean, I've seen like previous president and current president deep fakes of them that have cycled throughout Twitter, and it's like, oh,
The ones
This
of
is-
Trump are hilarious.
yeah, but it's unfortunately nowadays with everything being so politicized and people doing stuff for their own agenda, it murkies the water of investigation journalism.
Or just memeing. Some people do
Yeah.
it just a meme and don't realize the hindrance they're doing to actual investigations.
Mhm.
Like that's a large issue when investigating crimes against children on the internet, is some people will quote unquote troll, which is disgusting, and deep fake people who weren't actually there. And then the people who were there never get caught.
Yeah, I don't really think I have much else to say about this other than the fact that I'll just second what Michael said. Do your own research and
Mhm.
come to your own conclusions. You can. I'll leave the final decision up to the viewers or listeners
Yeah.
to come
And
to their own
keep in check
conclusions.
the biases of wherever you look this up, because anywhere you look it up, it's going to have a bias one way or another.
And be aware of your own bias too. That makes doing clear, conscientious research better, because it's easy on either side to get stuck in an echo chamber. But it's more beneficial to be able to go, okay, outside of my bias, I see these numbers.
Yeah.
Because research is research, but you also have to be able to go like, and maybe not necessarily as much on this issue, since if you know where you stand, you know where you stand, but on a lot of other issues, be able to check your bias at the door and look at the research for what it is.
Okay, so do we have anything else we have to discuss about this section, or can we go ahead and move on to implications of these two views?
Onward to the implications of dead babies.
Okay, so the implications, and obviously I have a bias as we were just discussing, so you can tell me if this is charitable or not. It's probably not, but I'm just gonna say it. The implication of a pro-life position are fairly narrow, but still important. It is that every child has a right to life because every human life is important, and some might even say sacred. And that's about it. That's really all we're fighting for here, but the bar is set so low by our society that even that is a controversial opinion. The implications of a pro-choice position is undeniable. Some lives just aren't worth the same as others. Isn't this an insidious and radically un-American, anti-human view? What happened to equal rights and opportunities and being a party for the people? If unborn children aren't protected, who's next on the chopping block? Your elderly grandparents, handicapped people? As I mentioned before, abortion implies that there is a hierarchy of rights, and that the rights of a child life are subservient to a mother's choice to keep them around. If that's the case, why not make it legal to kill a child outside the womb? They don't have the right to live, after all. Abortion undermines the logic of laws against murder.
I get where that's coming from, but there is a hierarchy already set in our president. There is no equality in America.
I agree, and I wish this is something that we could change, because this is... We'll tap on this. Go ahead.
It is something we can change, but we, the people, have to change it. That's the problem. Most people don't want to change it. People above us don't want to change it. We, the people, have to make this change.
So this is something that we will kind of talk about when we discuss equity laws. But essentially, there is kind of this hierarchical caste system in America where some people get preferential treatment over others. And this is not the American ideal. The American ideal is equality for all, equal treatment under the law, regardless of who you are or your background. And I think we have work to do to make that happen. Now, this is going to get into the ideological issue of how do you bring about doing that? I think the right is going to appeal to equality, and the left is going to appeal to equity. And that's a whole different rabbit trail. We'll discuss that at a later point. But anyway, I don't know if you guys have anything to respond about that, but there's a couple other implications I want to go into after this.
See, because like my viewpoint of pro-choice isn't necessarily that some human lives aren't valuable. It's just, say, when someone decides to have abortion, they can be able to do it safely. Kind of like with yours, putting it short. And because it's not necessarily on the pro-choice side, the value of human life, that's an entire different, well, possibly different ethical debate, which I know some pro-choice people have different viewpoints and whatnot. But it's mainly about the ability to have a certain medical procedure that unfortunately ends in a terminated fetus. Dead, live, as Michael said with the technical term of abortion.
So I think at the root of this, I mentioned this earlier on at the very beginning of this conversation, that essentially this is at the heart of the culture wars, and it's at the heart of the ideological split in America, because essentially it really boils down to your philosophy about what is life, when does life begin, and your religious views will come into account there. But there's also science, and from my perspective, science tends to back up the position that a human life is, there's a unique human life formed at conception because there is a separate DNA code. And my position as a Christian is that it is immoral to terminate life of an unborn innocent child. And that is essentially the pro-life position, is that it is immoral, therefore it should be illegal. And this also gets into different philosophies about law. Some people don't think you should legislate morality. I think that's a stupid argument, because essentially all laws are moral when you get down to it.
Not necessarily. There are immoral laws. There have and always will be.
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. What they intend to be is legislating morality. Laws intend to be the moral framework that we live by. Obviously, there's immoral laws. That's why I'm contesting this law.
Yeah. But also, the issue that people bring forth is it is a nation for freedom of religion for all, which means
for diversity. So like for you, if say you were a woman that was pregnant, I would want you to have the choice to have your child, where someone else, their morals are different, and in their eyes, it is okay, say, for first week they find out they're pregnant, to terminate the pregnancy, so they can do it safely.
And I think the
it's
issue,
mainly in America, it's a lot more interesting because we do have different religious backgrounds, different moral, political backgrounds. We're a wildfire, honestly.
Yeah, you do bring up a good point there. Sorry, go ahead.
We also lambast against radical extremist groups that bring forward. I remember back when Bush and Obama was president, the fear Obama would bring in Sharia law. And so we lambast against the religious extreme, basing our laws around that. Please note, that is not saying your belief is extreme. That is just something that I have seen on both sides, is the fear of different mindsets making an overarching theme in politics. And that's been echoed on both sides for, I don't even know how long. As long as there's been terror and extremists in the world.
Yeah, so there's two things. So the thing that David said about diversity in America being kind of the melting pot, this is maybe a sidebar, but we hail diversity as a good thing, as it's just this great, amazing good. Really, it's only good up to a certain point, because once you get a certain number of clashing views, take a Christian and a Muslim, for example, you're going to have conflict there because they're opposing views, and you multiply that by however much we have in America, and it's no wonder we have culture wars. Because there are different warring ideologies at a fundamental level, on a worldview level. And there was something I wanted to say about what Michael said, but I don't remember what it was. I'll let that point stand, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see. Because we are a melting pot, but we also say that every man has the right to freedom, and so therefore we allow ourselves to be a melting pot. And we don't carry the xenophobic traits of nations past and nations present, because then it could get a little scary. Look at Japan, pre-modern world. Look at North Korea right now. China's extremely xenophobic.
Yeah, monocultural places tend to think a little too highly of themselves, we could put it.
Yeah.
And then that allows.
I'm just saying it's only good up to a certain point, because then you get a lot of clashing, and then you end up being America.
Yeah,
and we don't
the
know
American
how
way should be compromise for at least the little things. Some things you just gotta agree to disagree on, but if it's an issue, I mean, there's always some way to figure it out.
Yeah. But instead of trap it, and this is a little side note that we've touched on before, with modern media and everything, we've just found it easier to get into an echo chamber instead of listening to dissenting opinions and conversing over them like we should, because we are a melting pot. We are vastly different. We just lock ourselves away, put our fingers in there and go, no, can't hear you, I'm right. Instead of talking about them, which is what we're doing here on this podcast, is we're talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and we agree, we disagree, but that's life. We learn from it.
On to Bailey.
All right, so okay, this is kind of a social critique, but I think abortion exists primarily because of its utilitarian purpose, which is to avoid the consequences of your own actions. It's a medical undo button, a quick fix for that accidental pregnancy. And here's the crutch when it comes to a lot of straw man arguments against the pro-life position. People want to say, oh, well, it's just about having the choice. Well, at the end of the day, the choice was already made, and you run the gamble of potentially getting pregnant when you choose to have sex. And so you should be informed about that. At the very least, you should know that, having sex makes babies. That's what it does. But also you should know, that should factor into your decision on who you have sex with, how frequently have sex, etc. Okay. I'm gonna. Sorry, do you have something to say?
Oh, real quick. Even if on whatever side, you should definitely be thinking who you're having sex with, the repercussions and all that.
Yeah. So, I think Christians are leading the fight in the pro-life movement because of their belief that all people are created in the image of God and have an innate right to life. And the secular, non-religious people are the ones pushing for more and more abortion because their worldview doesn't justify objective morality and simply doesn't have a category for sin. Instead, immorality is merely subjective, which is precisely how you have people advocating for a right that is very much wrong. You may have some pushback against that, and that's okay. But that's kind of how that kind of calls back to at the beginning when I said that there is a difference between the worldviews under these issues.
Yeah, because abortion has been happening since BC times in many different ways. Christianity is kind of a weird one for kind of taking a stance and saying, if a woman gets in a fight and the fetus dies, man will be fine. Right? Well, man will be fine or will give up his life or something like that. And like old laws.
And also, like, to be fair, I could be wrong about this, but obviously the Christians are leading the fight on this in America specifically. But all of the Abrahamic religions have a view on this issue.
Yeah.
And essentially are pro-life. Now, granted, obviously, because Christians are the larger number in America, that's why they're leading that fight. But yeah, I mean, that's not to, and I don't want to say that, because I mentioned, for example, that secular people push for more and more abortion, which is true and is not true. It depends on the people, I should say.
Yeah.
Not everyone's
we
pushing
know,
for more and more abortion. I don't think David
not
is.
Religious. No, I'd rather not have abortion, but I say it. If
On
it
a
happens,
policy level, it is kind of, unfortunately, a binary between the two issues, the two parties.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I mean, as we've kind of talked about, it's not just about the issue itself, but how can we prevent the issue as well?
Right. So we're going to segue into that in just a minute. But just one little last thing here is the reason why abortion is the single greatest problem plaguing America. The single greatest threat to fundamental human rights is the insidious philosophical implications. You are only a human person if you can feel pain or have a heartbeat or brain. And still, many abortion advocates are okay with murdering a child if it has those things. Disregard the fact that people in a coma are still a human person. Someone without a brain is still a human person. Reductionistic views of humanity are literally destroying hundreds of thousands of lives every year. If we can't stand up for the most fundamental human right of them all, the right to life, then literally no other rights matter. And that's really where I want to kind of rest my case on this issue, is that the reason I think this is the most important issue is because if we can't say that humans deserve a right to life, then no other right that we're debating matters, because that is the most fundamental right of them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
and one thing I'd like to say is, in saying the right to life, and not necessarily you right this moment, but people should go more into detail about that, what that entails. Because it's easy to say right to life in one stretch, and then it doesn't matter in another. So what is
the principle?
Yes,
asking.
what is, and not necessarily for you, but for other people. Like, it's the right to life, the right to have water, food, air, and housing. Is the right to life just the right to be born? Be specific in what, and this isn't for you because I know where you're coming from, but this is more for everybody else. Be specific, be poignant, and think for yourself. And so, again, this ties into my issues with a lot of modern Christianity is very blind faith, sort of. Very just what was the word we use for those type of Christians?
Cultural Christians, maybe?
Cultural Christians, I think, was one of the terms, where they say that because that's what they were told to say. Actually, think about it. Think about implications on both sides. Do your research and just think about shit. Don't just say it to say it.
And also, just as an interesting note on this, believe it or not, I wasn't always firmly in the pro-life camp. Just, I kind of grew up in the cultural milieu that abortion is wrong as a Christian, that you should believe that. But also, when I was going to college, you're going to encounter some different perspectives. And so I, for the first time, I think it was my freshman year of college, kind of questioned my presuppositions about why I thought that abortion was wrong. And so there was a political philosophy course that I took. I don't know if it was political philosophy, but it was some kind of politics course. Definitely shouldn't have taken it as my first semester because it was a little above me. But anyway, still good to have. You know, there were a number of people who were pro-choice and there were a number of people who were pro-life, and there were differing perspectives, like we've mentioned, that I hadn't heard before. And so this led me down the rabbit trail of going on YouTube and looking up debates on this issue where there's a very left-leaning position, a very right-leaning position, and then a more moderate position on these issues. And through doing that, and also at the same time, ironically, growing in my faith, despite not going to church, actually, this was the time I was doing my research on my religious beliefs at the same time. I came to the conclusion that essentially there really aren't, from my perception, any good arguments for abortion that don't have insidious implications. And at the end of the day, obviously, my belief that the right of an unborn child to have the right to life is fundamental and important. And so that's kind of how I got to the position that I am. It's not that, you know, and I'm not saying that you're accusing me of this, but for people out there who didn't know, I have looked into this on both sides of the issue, and this is like the one political issue that I care the most about. So obviously I wanted to do my homework, and if any of what we've talked about in this session has interested you, obviously the sources will be in the show notes, but yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and also one thing I'd like to add is, if you are talking about these topics to people, or you're interested in figuring your viewpoint, don't talk through people, talk to people. It's easy to feel you're higher than thou when you get an opinion, but as we learn opinions, we are multifaceted beings. We grow, we change, and we learn by listening to differing opinions, similar opinions, debating with others, learning more about ourselves. Talk to people, not through them. Because again, I think the issue all of us have with the other side is the vocal minority talking through instead of to.
Yeah.
I think that's just a good little side note to add in.
Yeah.
Because even though we may get a little heated here, we're talking to each other, we're discussing, we're bringing up differing opinions. We might not change each other's ideas, but we'd still learn and we grow as people.
It's also important to mention that, you know, not everything I've brought up in this episode is specifically targeted at you guys personally, because obviously we've talked about this and we know how this goes. But we've had
hours conversations.
Yeah, so this is more targeted to the average. There's lots of types of people in the pro-choice camp, and so I have to, you know, say things where I need to say things about certain people in order to kind of make a point. But obviously, I don't mean any offense or attack against you guys. I've been glad that we've been able to discuss this in a, for the most part, civil manner. I mean, I wouldn't say this has been, you know, overly aggressive considering the issue.
I mean, we've had this talk in person and we haven't choked each other out.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're still friends. We still have love for each other. And I think that's another big thing. No matter your side, don't be a fucking dick. Don't be a fucking terrorist. All right. Because you just make your side look fucking worse and we will bully you. Everyone will bully you. Don't be a dick. Talk to people, not through them.
Okay.
And cool. Show love, man. Show love.
Do we have any other implications that we want to bring up before we move on into the final section, which is how do we address this issue? How do we fix it?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to say on that topic.
Okay. All right. So this is a very important part of this conversation is how do we fix this? Because, you know, if we're going to talk about abortion, typically these are legal debates about whether it should be illegal or not. So fixing the abortion issue is multifaceted. It's not just a legal issue, it's a cultural issue. Of course, government regulation and the eventual outlaw of abortion, in my perspective, is ideal, but we are a long ways from that. Even if Roe v. Wade is overturned this summer, that would only allow states to make their own laws regarding abortion. And again, The government can only make, enforce, and interpret laws, not dictate culture or the way we think. So, refer to prohibition laws if you need a reminder of this. So, if we really want to solve the problem, we really need to be focused on changing the culture to decrease the demand for abortion. That's a reason why the pro-life movement is a movement and not only aims to change the laws, but to address the culture, which is where I believe the real battle lies. So, the first thing I think we need to do is agree that abortion is wrong. If we don't, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle. And I believe that this fight needs to start locally. Christians should join pro-life organizations and spread awareness. Simply educating people will go a long way because many pro-choice advocates don't actually know the intricacies of what they're advocating for, such as abortion statistics, procedures, its effects on women, etc. Hopefully, some people have learned some things through this conversation. We also need to fix our society's view of the self. Essentially, we hate ourselves today, and mental health is the worst it's ever been. If we can't see our own dignity, how do we expect people to see the dignity of a child? Do you guys have any thoughts on that before I go into like a bigger cultural issue?
Well, I mean, mental health is always a key point for changing anything and any cultural thing because it is such a large issue in today. I mean, you look at just the statistics of, especially even in the extreme short term, what we've had to do to prepare and prevent and protect against the coronavirus. Like, we all were pretty much locked inside for how long?
Yeah, mental health is in an extremely bad case. Suicide is through the roof, especially in teenage girls right now, because we're social animals and we were told to not do that for a while, and that's had consequences.
And we're also told not to talk about our problems. Like, with, again, that talking about the problem ties into the teenage abortions that have happened. Is they're probably honestly too afraid of the consequences and of communicating what's happened. And the same can be said with mental health. There's so many of us that go without getting proper help or even acknowledging that there's something wrong because we're afraid of the stigma and the taboo behind it, because it's not okay to feel those ways. That's not what we should strive for, but it's okay for you to get help. It's okay to accept you need help, and whether that's with therapy, with getting medically assisted therapy, whatever it may be, it's okay to reach out and get that help. It's okay not to be okay. The goal should be to get to where you can be okay, though.
Right.
And I think we do a disservice on both sides by not bringing that up when talking about these subjects, as mental health plays a lot into it. And to me, it's one of the greatest things that tie between economics, religion, politics.
It's a through line.
Yeah, it spiderwebs through it all.
Yeah. So, a greater cultural issue is fatherlessness. Roughly 1 in 4 children do not have a father or stepfather in their home. African Americans have the highest fatherlessness rate, while Asian Americans have the lowest fatherlessness rate. Children without a father are at 4 times greater risk of poverty, 7 times more likely to become pregnant as a teen, 2 times more likely to suffer obesity, 2 times more likely to drop out of high school, more likely to have behavioral problems, to abuse alcohol and drugs, to commit crime, and to go to prison. These statistics parallel abortion statistics, and given some of the overlap between individuals who have abortions and individuals who don't have fathers, there may be a direct correlation here. On top of the abortion issue, we know that fatherlessness has a significantly adverse effect on the child's developmental psychology. The phrase "daddy issues" came about for a reason. So this is why I say that men need to be involved in this issue, because admittedly, Men perpetuate the problem. As I discussed earlier, 23% of women choose to have abortions because they can't afford a child. Now, I don't know how to say this kindly, but more men need to own up to their own decisions. We need a culture to adopt a greater moral calling if we really want to fix this issue. But when we're living in a society that is constantly attempting to undermine the family, I'm admittedly pessimistic about this.
Yeah, and glad you brought up the kind of economics, because right now, if, say, any of us were to have a kid, we'd be pretty much slap broke. And having it to where we can be economically viable for to be able to raise a kid, if, say, that would happen, is a good step in preventing, saying, abortion now. That's a quarter of abortions gone.
And I think the fatherlessness issue or and the mental health issue tie in together a lot, because there's a lot of children that lose a parent due to mental health issues, drug addiction, imprisonment, or the lack of the pure apathy of bringing a life into the world. It's such a major fucking thing. That is part of you until you're dead.
Yeah.
And even past then, it's still a living part of you going forward. And if you're going to bring a life into this world, you better take fucking responsibility for it, because you are its source of, you're its only supposed to be guaranteed source of love, of food, of shelter, of care, of knowledge. That's you on both male and female. You're the one who brought it into this world. You're supposed to be there to nurture and to do all these things and to educate. You can't just push that off by sending a paycheck every month either. You might be financially a good parent, but you're still a deadbeat.
Yeah. And on the other side, you can do your best to emotionally take care of your kid, but if you got to work 2 jobs and somehow get sleep, feed the kids and everything else as a single parent, you don't really have that any chance. Because I know studies shown that regardless of the sex of the parents, having 2 parents inherently increases a kid's chance of success further on.
Yeah.
And it just economically, it makes sense to have 2 people living in the same household with the same bills, taking care of the same things. It economically makes sense to have that structure, which then allows you to work on the mental health issues, which allows you to nurture and to care and to teach. It's a lot harder when it's one person trying to make it on their own and do their best. And so for any single parent, I absolutely applaud you. But also something we can do better as a society is be there for each other. You got a friend who's a single parent and you guys are like tight. Spend some time with them. Get to know their kids. Maybe they might not have a father. They might not have a mother. But they can have another role model to help to try and bridge that gap. You can be a father figure or mother figure without being the parent.
Or
family is what you make
a mentor
of it.
If you don't want that parental role, being a mentor, because I mean, how many like success stories have we heard that they come from a rough part, parents have to work 2 jobs each, but they have a mentor to guide them in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned so much from the mentor figures or father figures in my life that I would never have learned. I would never had the insight, because we are social animals. And it's partially true that it does take a village to raise a child. And so I think that's something, both, if you're going to have a baby, you got to be there for that baby. You got to do your absolute best. It's okay if sometimes you may fall short, but fuck it, give it your all. Don't half-ass it. And second, as a society, we can do more for our fellow man. We can help. We can just spend time with them. It doesn't have to be monetary. Your time is worth more than you would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we can do, because with this issue, it is both a cultural and a political issue. But I think it's more of a cultural issue right now at this point, because a lot of the work that needs to be done is on the ground at the cultural level. Yes, there's political work that needs to be done top down as well, but that's not going to happen until the culture has been changed. And so, maybe there are political ways of encouraging parents to be there for their children.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe these,
like, on the economic side.
Yeah. Maybe there's economic provisions to encourage, or supplemental programs to encourage a 2-family household, or something to encourage, to decrease the fatherlessness rate. This can be done at a political level, but I think the underlying issue is that it's a cultural issue. We have to accept a higher moral calling, and a lot of people don't.
Also, to kind of tie into that, there's something that I was watching someone I like on a podcast, and this is something which I did not expect him to say, because he's always been, I don't want kids, but then he finally went into why, and it was due to the issues of his parents were well off, they never spent time with him, and so there were those psychological issues deep down, and on top of that, the only college course he remembers is early development psychology. I think if you're going to be a parent,
it's extremely important to be there early.
We should first, as a society, allow you to take courses to educate yourself on the developing mind of your child, your mind too, how it develops as a parent, and things you can do to help bring a good relationship forth. And it's not binary. It's like, I'll give one example. If a baby's crying in a crib, if you go there and let them know it's okay, they're always going, inherently ingrained in their head, they're going to know someone's there for them. If you just let them lay there and cry it out, there's always going to be that seed that's planted that they're alone in this world. And no matter how hard they cry, it's not going to help.
Are you familiar with this guy's got a very unfortunate name, but his name is Eric Erickson, who's developed the stages of life, essentially, that you go through certain stages at certain age ranges. You've probably heard something of it. It's a very common psychological model, and we'll talk about it ironically in one of the upcoming episodes. But yeah, just learning that there's so much that happens at an early age, and that there's so much potential for things to go wrong if your parents aren't doing things right. There's been a lot of research into that area, and to your point, essentially, especially early on, it's important for both parents to be there, because that's the more foundational period of your life. Of course, you need them throughout your life, but you need them in different areas and in different ways at different stages in your development.
Yeah, and also the reason I say I would like every parent to go to a course like that is there's a lot of things that are passed on generation that creates that trauma that we don't even realize that our parents did. And so because they did it, we do it. We don't think about it because it's ingrained in us.
Yeah, it's just subconscious.
Yeah, I mean, going back,
it's like certain phrases you would tell it, like if a kid who's potty training, what do you do if they use the bathroom? Do you let them know, oh, it's okay, this is natural, but we're working to get you doing this? Or do you belittle them and let them know that what they just did was wrong? And as a parent, people don't understand how difficult it is. You're not always going to make the right call, but you should educate yourself on how to properly acclimate a child to the ever-changing society that we are in. I mean, it's like getting this is going to sound weird, but if someone gets a puppy, they should be prepared for a puppy in every learning step, the potty training, the biting, the crying. Some people prepare more for their getting an animal than they do bringing a human life into this world.
Yeah.
And that's fucked up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to the next. There's a couple things that I'd like to talk about that I think we need to address as a culture. And as we go on through these things that I think are potential solutions, the further we go, the more pessimistic I'm going to become about them, just because of being realistic about what actually will happen in this country, just knowing where we are right now. So the problem of abortion is a direct fruit of our society's view on sex. In the 60s, the sexual revolution took hold, and years downstream, we have to deal with the aftermath. Abortion was legalized in 1973, just shortly after this cultural shift began. Now, abortion is a grave and highly immoral band-aid that has been placed on an open wound that needs surgery. Again, the issue will not solve itself. People don't like being told they can't have sex with everyone. But if they don't stop having uninhibited sex with everyone, they will continue to feed the statistics. Okay, I'll go ahead and move on to the next point. Again, this one's going to be controversial, but I believe that porn also contributes to the problem of abortion. Porn is affordable, easily accessible, and anonymous, and perpetuates in the mind of a viewer an entitlement to sex. It normalizes casual sexual activity, which increases risky sexual behavior. Now, obviously, from a Christian perspective, uninhibited sexual activity with someone you're not married to is a gravely immoral sin. But even from a non-religious perspective, you don't have to look far to see the statistically negative health effects of an individual who is sexually irresponsible. And just as a sidebar, there have been many meta-analyses of, which Fight the New Drug points this out as well. I may leave a link to this specific study. There have been various meta-analyses done on people who watch porn and are in a relationship and who don't watch porn and are in a relationship. And virtually all of them show that people who don't watch porn and are in a relationship have higher relationship satisfaction. You can associate that to a number of causes, but this is, how big of a sliver of the problem is it? I don't know, but it is a contributing factor.
Yeah. And is it all right if I point one thing out?
Go ahead.
Okay. And one thing that I would agree is an issue when it comes to like pornography is it sets an unnatural idea of what sexual relationships are. That's not what it is. A random person isn't going to come to your house and it's not going to last 3 hours.
Yeah.
And
an 11-year-old doesn't know that.
Yeah,
necessarily. I mean, they may or may not, but I mean, like, if that's where they're getting, that's why I talked about like parents needing to educate their children, because if you don't educate them, someone else will. If they're getting their sex education from porn, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I was going to say that leads up to the parents needing to have these discussions and go, maybe, and obviously you don't have to explain what a healthy relationship looks like sexually to someone who is 10, but you have to let them know more so what it doesn't look like, because they're going to, let's face facts, we've all looked up porn. We've all been young, horny.
I don't think there's anyone in the world that hasn't seen porn. Well, I'm not going to say that everyone's seen porn, but like everyone after a certain age has seen it.
Yeah. And the issue lies not that we see it, but it paints an unhealthy picture of what a relationship and what a sexual relationship is if we aren't taught beforehand that, hey, this is, first off, these are my beliefs as your parent. This is what a healthy relationship looks like. Two people loving each other, willing to spend a lifetime together, holding that family bond through thick and thin, better or worse, and striving to be a cohesive unit together. Not, oh, mommy was ordering pizza and he just opened the box and there it was. Or the milkman.
One other part of the sexual education thing is Obviously, I advocate for the parents teaching this, not the school system teaching this, because there are, in some places, people arguing that porn should be showed in school to educate people on sex. And like, you're an idiot. Okay. All you have to do is look a little bit, just do a little bit of research. And you know that is a terrible idea.
Yeah. I wouldn't have a problem with, especially for like older high school students, once they've reached that level of maturity, being shown, like how we were shown that boring ass drawn wiener
In 5th grade.
Like like drawn like a medical book, essentially.
Yeah. Don't show actual porn, but if you show 2 drawings of people and be like, this is how it happens, this is what happens. But also, your job as a parent is to inform and teach your kids and try to make them better people in society. If you're not willing to take on, and that's why it got pushed to schools in the first place, people aren't willing to fucking talk to their kids.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't know if I would trust the state to do that, and at what point that would be appropriate to do it. That gets very hairy into
I think
is raising your kid. Is it the state or is it you?
Yeah, but also the
teach
issue
about
is
like the health, like sexual health, like, oh, this is how a woman's body works, this is how a male's body work. Fine. I think once more on the emotional aspects, and some of that is either for like is something for a parent, but like the mental aspects too, probably both of them would be fine. But it just depends on who teaches it, the course, and all that, and who actually wrote the book.
Yeah, it's a very, very fine line to draw there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also we should teach kids on what an abusive relationship looks like, or a toxic one, so we can avoid a lot of these issues and what is okay. It's not okay if you're 14 and he's 18. I don't care what anyone says.
Yeah.
It's not okay if he's 21 and you're 17. I don't care what anyone says. It's not okay if...
Dude, I knew people like this.
Yeah. It's not okay if you're 18 and he's 50. It's not okay for a relationship. Your mind is still developing until 25 for men, and what is it for women?
I think 21.
21 or 23 for women.
It's a range. It's not an exact definite point.
Yeah.
But even then, you haven't lived fucking life.
Yeah.
We should be taught and teach. And you're not going to be able to go into, every little detail.
Right. Age appropriate discussions at different ages.
Also teach your kids about how the internet works and social media makes you want to just look at stuff because it's based on an addictive idea.
Yes, the addiction model is very true with
because they want
porn,
the clicks for the
social
money.
Media,
news,
gambling, everything. That it basically all follows the addiction cycle
Music,
in the brain.
Yeah, everything. But yeah, so obviously we need to be able to teach kids and not allow them to learn from pornography of what a relationship is, or social media, YouTube, TikTok, all that shit. That's not
good lord, dude.
Shit.
I think that's a really big problem now is people are growing up on social media, and social media when we grew up is way different than it is now. Even
it was still awful.
Yeah, it was awful, but you just didn't have the same problems that people have today with it. Different problems.
It's because people don't understand how social media works. Because if they'd known, they just look at it like, oh, yeah, look at this stupid thing. Okay, I'm done for today.
Yeah, and I mean, legitimately, I've never felt better than getting rid of all that shit.
Yeah, it's same.
Cool.
Yeah.
I miss keeping up with like some things like sports or music and things like, or cool little art things, but it feels great to be able to just take a step back. Being without a phone for a week was terrifying, but relieving at the same time.
Yeah, there's part of me that's like, I'm currently off of all social media just in general right now. But it's good because you're not worrying about what's going on social media. But also I've debated like this is a sidebar obviously, but I've debated like what is the proper solution to that? Like, do I go back to social media and use each platform for specific purposes? Like I use Instagram for following bands and stuff and seeing when music comes out, or do I use Instagram for this, use Facebook for keeping up with family, don't use Twitter because it's shit, and and just, do that? Or should I just not use social media at all? I'm still trying to figure that out.
I use Twitter for comedy, but I used to.
Like, I used to be able to just go on Twitter for memes, and now it's like everything is political, and you can't avoid it.
I block so many people, but I also am willing to take that step at moderating my feed because, I know how it works.
Yeah, I've tried unfollowing certain people, but it's still a cesspool of garbage.
You know how often I use my phone. The algorithm doesn't know what to do with me.
Yeah. It's funny looking at our social media accounts because we don't follow anyone. So it's just like, maybe you'll like this because the people you follow like this. And it's like, actually, no. And then I just don't use it. I basically just use our socials to post stuff and nothing else.
But for the quick side note, I think for you, it'd be best just to find your moderate balance. Because it's okay in small doses, just like drinking. It is okay in moderation. You just got to find that moderation. And maybe you can't, and that's also okay. It's okay to be like, I can't moderate this, so it's better for me not to have it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I've been going off and on with it, but I'll figure it out eventually. Anyway, back to the actual topic at hand. Just kind of concluding this section, I do kind of begin to be a little bit more cynical about the change that will actually occur in our culture. So we need to shift our culture's view on sex, fatherhood, children, self-worth, human rights, and objectivity. And given the way that our culture is headed, I'm not optimistic about this in the short term, but there are some standout people in the pro-life scene and some others that are addressing the broader issues that give me hope for the long term. And ultimately, I think the implications to these solutions are ultimately religious. I don't seriously expect people to change their mind on this issue without a worldview shift. Secularism simply doesn't equip you with the moral framework to stop having one-night stands, believe in the rights of the unborn, or own up to the girl that you just impregnated and become a father. It just doesn't. I believe that the implications of the pro-life position, if we're really going to fix this issue, in the long run are religious. Just like it took generations of moral degradation to get us to this point, it will take generations to dig us out. To say the very least, movement in this direction will be slow.
Yeah, and me personally, I think once a lot of the core issues are addressed, it then becomes easier to first make the legal distinction and allow for the medically necessary and not allow for the medically unnecessary. And it also will make it easier for people to go, yeah, we shouldn't do this. Especially once all the issues put at hand are addressed. And once people see that it on both sides, it's a multifaceted thing.
Right.
If you're gonna, because like with me and David, even though we are pro-choice, we have implications and we have things that we want to change and we have groundwork to do. And once that is met or progressed on, the need won't be there. We all have the same ultimate goal is, for nobody to vacuum babies out.
So kind of actually a similar solution is essentially what you're talking about. I know I brought up Fight the New Drug a couple times. Their objective is to not necessarily outlaw porn, but to decrease demand. And so they're addressing the issue of the culture. And essentially what you're saying with abortion is the same thing, that instead of, starting with outlawing it at the top-down level, you need to adjust the culture and decrease the demand.
Yeah, the culture, the economics, the mental, everything.
Just like with drugs, literally, just like with the judicial, just like with drugs. That's why I've always been a big advocate for education, for handing out Narcan, for doing needle exchanges so kids don't get poked in the fucking park by some junkie's needle that he left behind. We shouldn't. That's why I've always been an advocate for the decriminalization of drugs. Not necessarily making them legal, but making it where if people want help, they're not chastised for it and they can actually get the help they need. And because locking someone in jail doesn't fix their mental illness, it doesn't fix their physical dependency.
Doesn't fix their money issues.
So yeah, kind of in the same vein with that, that's kind of where I stand on a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of these issues that we're going to talk about have the thorough line of it's a cultural issue first, a political issue second.
Which, you know, it's funny.
What's
when
up?
we were talking about conservatism in the Republican Party, there's a very Republican way of doing things, starting on the small level and building up.
Yeah.
Is it not?
I mean, it is, but
No.
I mean, that's...
Though in the modern sense, it's sometimes the opposite.
Yeah. In the long term, though, that's where I can see it being successful. Because starting from the top and trying to work your way down, we've seen how that's failed with so many things.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually on that topic about the top-down thing, this is something we should have addressed in this episode, but I haven't brought it up. I wanted to ask you guys, there's currently a case in the Supreme Court being debated. We've heard the oral arguments. I don't know if you guys have listened to it or not, but essentially the implications of this case is it could either gut or completely overturn Roe v. Wade. And as I mentioned earlier, if this were to happen, that wouldn't outlaw abortion necessarily. It would allow the states to make their own laws regarding abortion as opposed to having it.
Yeah, because they're
prevention
talking
at the
about that
federal level.
one law that is scary on a precedent.
So I wanted to ask you guys, are you in favor of this since you draw the line at viability? Because essentially that's where it would, at the most extreme level, in a lot of places, that's where it would go, is it would draw the line at viability. Now, granted, of course, there's states that will outlaw it. There's some states that will become abortion facilities,
Havens.
Essentially. So,
Safe havens.
yeah, I didn't want to use that word. But yeah, where do you guys stand on this case? Do you think it should be overturned or no, and why?
I think right now it should not be, because take a look at the one state that tried to do the law that was going to legalize it, and then you could rat out someone to get money.
Oh, it's Texas.
Yeah, because if people are thinking like that with those type of laws, that just destroys any cultural idea.
No, I have a counterpoint to that. The only reason that they were able to do that, and the reason
it was a loophole.
It was a loophole, because that's essentially what they had to do, legally speaking, with the current system with Roe v. Wade in place. If Roe v. Wade were overturned, then essentially states would just make their own laws. They wouldn't have to rely on measures like that to outlaw abortion. They could just outlaw abortion.
Yeah.
Or restrict it, or
since the
any number of things.
Since the issues we have are spread throughout the U.S., having it federally in law is okay at now. Now, once certain states make progress, sure, make your own laws. But we got to fix the economics, the mental health, everything else before that step. So having it be like, okay, here's the end goal. Y'all need to make progress first, because, it's not going to change anything except right now, make illegal abortions a lot more out there.
Yeah, it's kind of like I haven't paid too much attention to it because I've been trying to avoid politics for
that's fair.
A week or two.
Yeah,
but,
same here. I've just heard a little bit.
It was like a month or two ago when it happened, but that's okay.
From my perspective, the issue right now is obviously we've stated what should be done. The actual grassroots, men on the ground type shit. It could, because doing something right now could just turn into a big shit show and not actually change anything. Because if one states yes, one states no, it's still going to happen. It's still going to go across state borders. Look at the messy legalization of pot. One state had it, so that meant all the states could get their weed. Doing it that way, and similar to gun control, very similar. Just because I can't buy a pistol in Georgia, but I can buy one in South Carolina, doesn't mean I can't bring my pistol to Georgia. Doesn't mean I can't bring my pot from California.
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything in the grand scheme of things. It just might make it, quote unquote, a little harder, but realistically, it doesn't change too much.
Yeah.
So if anything is going to happen, there should be cultural shifts and groundwork put forth first, or else the house will crumble on an unset foundation.
So I'm going to go ahead and just put this out there, and then I'll let you respond. But obviously, I'm going to disagree. I think that it is a good thing to overturn Roe v. Wade and set the precedent on the state level, because at least that's a movement in the right direction. Of course, it will decrease the overall number of abortions, and I'm fine with that. As far as the cultural issues and addressing those things, that may be a good point to make, except for the fact that, number one, public opinion on abortion, a majority of people lean towards restricting abortion in some form, whether that's, drawing the line at viability or a certain trimester or whatever. Include that with people who don't think abortion should be legal. That's a majority of Americans on this issue right now, statistically speaking. Also, you have, like in Texas, lots of pro-life organizations kind of filling the void of those abortion facilities, providing the needs of the parents. And I think, obviously, we should make those more well-known and kind of broadcast them out there for people who need that help. I think in general, it is a movement in the right direction. And yes, there are going to be hiccups, but it is still better than leaving that precedent of not allowing states to make abortion laws. And that leaves open the possibility of more states making laws where essentially you have, mercenaries in Texas kind of acting as the enforcement of the law. This kind of will allow states to make their own laws about that issue, and I think that's just in general a better thing.
Yeah. No,
I get where you're coming from, but
I don't think as we say with the top problem doing it top down, a lot of people are just going to stop there. Like, it'll get banned there and say, but it will still be happening, instead of addressing the national cultural issues. Everything will just be stagnant. Where starting from the bottom up with the issues themselves will change the national opinion, and we will have a better society to enact that legislation through.
Yeah, because with things like that, where some things have been left for legalization on the state level, due to the culture at hand, with there no groundwork being pushed, 10, 20 years later, they go back, oh, never mind, we'll just take that off. It didn't really change too much. So we can just do. Oh, yeah, people will buy into it because they're stupid. Pull it.
Yeah, I think also sorry, go ahead.
And that's why I'd say focus more on the vocal minority and the culture at hand and the issues at hand, because once those are more addressed, it's easier to get something set in stone, if that makes sense. And because the issue with bringing laws or reverting things like that is it can create kind of a Wild West situation, and then in 10 years they just pull the plug and go, we don't really give a shit because no one really changed their minds. So that's the only reason I'd say it.
So essentially you're saying because of the implications of what could happen, that it shouldn't happen.
Well, more so if you want it to succeed on a long-term scale.
That's not the best way of going about it.
Yes. Yeah, this is the Band-Aid, not the stitches.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, just like
it does. But I think it is still, that issue itself is debatable just because of the things that I mentioned. I think that there are a lot of people doing a lot of good work just in general in these areas. obviously not everything is fixed, but it's not like we're starting at complete ground zero on all of these issues that we brought up. I think some progress has been made, and a lot of them, more work needs to be done, but
a lot of them aren't well known.
Yeah.
So when someone is thinking about, can I take care of this child I just found out I have, and no one around them knows, oh, there's these sources that will help you out, that will get you started, figure out a plan for you.
Or, they were taught how babies are fucking made and how not to have them.
Yeah, well, there's also...
That wouldn't be an issue to start.
Part of why they're not super well known is because they're local and they're relative to that area. And so you do have to do a little bit of homework to figure out, like, okay, what facilities are local to me that are providing these services?
Yeah.
There's other that are more national, like, for example, Live Action, that is like a national organization that's kind of trying to change minds on the issue. But the aims of those organizations are different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also falls, what was I about to say? And
see, it's happening to you too.
Yeah. And like
I'm the clear-headed one.
I was saying with the economics issue, if they can afford it, then then they're just going to go somewhere where they can afford abortion because they can't afford the child and stuff like that. It just makes it might eliminate a little bit, but it is not going to be the long-term zero solution.
Okay.
Because like, if we have, say, society has changed where there's zero abortions, but the law is still in place, there's zero abortions. Regardless of that law, the culture has changed with it.
I think at that point the law will have changed, but
yeah, but you know what I mean.
Note. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, depending on who's in charge, because we know how laws go.
I mean,
right?
Hey, we don't care about playing pinball on Wednesday. No, we are beating your wife on the courthouse step on the first Sunday of every month. Those laws are still in
between
the book.
1 and 4 p.m.
But it's precisely.
It's very specific.
Those laws are still in the book, and they've never been changed because they don't fucking matter.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's probably just best to say agree to disagree. We both have made our cases on this issue.
Yeah. We agree on ways to solve it.
Right. So we have finally reached the end of this conversation. There's a lot of things we brought up, and I know we kind of went on rabbit trails about side topics, and I did warn you guys, this is a very big issue and it touches a lot of other things, but it's important that we discuss these things thoroughly and address everything, all of the implications, which is hopefully what we did here for the most part. Do we have any other concluding thoughts before we wrap it up?
No.
I don't necessarily have concluding thoughts, but I got a couple fun questions.
Oh no. Okay.
Okay. Let's say a man doesn't want to ever have a child, right? He plans to either adopt or not have children, period.
Okay. Is he an antinatalist, or is he just agnostic towards children, or what are we talking about?
I'll put myself up as the example. I don't want to have children due to my genetic dispositions. Mm-hmm. And so I've decided if I ever do want to have a child, I would adopt.
Okay.
Because there's so many children out there who deserve a good home.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be down?
Oh no.
With government-funded vasectomies? Can't have an abortion if you can't get pregnant. And vice versa for female anatomy. Because
that's not where I thought you were going with that, but okay.
Because it's very difficult as a young person to get those procedures done. And it's even more difficult for a female, even if she medically needs it, to get those procedures done. So it's just a fun little thought experiment.
This is a very specific issue, and I've not thought about it enough. So I'm just going to say that I haven't thought about it enough, and that doesn't mean I'm going to not give an answer. I'm going to give one off the top of my dome. And if it changes tomorrow, that's why. It's because I haven't thought about this. But just given, I think the pretext that you built up to that was completely unrelated. But would you say, you're asking if I would support federally funded vasectomies? Is it just in general, or in medically necessary cases, or what?
I'd say in general.
Or where would I draw the line on that?
I mean, I would first go in general.
Yeah, so I would say
start with a blanket.
I would say in general, no, because I think that's immoral to prevent women from doing from creating life. I think that's in general immoral, especially if we're talking about young women. Now, in the case of some women who just can't have children, or it's unhealthy for them, or they have some kind of medical condition, I would say that maybe. I would say, maybe that would be okay. But I think in general, you shouldn't thwart the end of a human, the intended aim and purpose of a human's ability to create life, essentially.
Well, quick note. These procedures are reversible. For a man, you don't even have to get your vasectomy reversed to have a baby. They can literally pull your sperm cells and give it either to you to inject into your lovely wife, or they can medically inject it into your lovely wife. And it's not quite as easy for women, but getting your tubes tied, for lack of better words, is reversible. And sometimes they naturally reverse themselves. So it's not.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it to go in depth. So that's just where I'm going to draw the line, unfortunately. Sorry.
And in a perfect future, would you support young aspiring parents or people who have found out they're going to have a child to take these psychological courses and courses to help teach them how to be a better parent, or how to parent, period?
Like just in general, or like federally fund this stuff, or what?
Just in general, whether it's local.
Obviously, I'm not going to object to that. Like that's just generally a good thing.
Some people on both sides would object to that. I am not even joking.
Well, I can see debates arising around like what the specific curriculum is, and I guess if you want to get into the nitty gritty, there's a debate to be had there. But in general, no, I'm not against it.
Let's see. I'm looking at it more of a like child psychology, developmental psychology, which is already in college courses and has a
I've taken a course on it. Well, not maybe. I think it was motivational psychology that I took, and then maybe something on developmental. I'm not sure if I took that or not. But anyway, I've taken something very similar, and I understand like there's a lot that I didn't know.
Yeah, and I think we should offer education to aspiring parents or people who have found out they're going to be a parent, to kind of prepare them for success instead of letting them fail.
Well, to be fair, when my mom was pregnant and there was something like that being done by the local hospital that we grew up nearby, and they kind of were teaching you like how to hold the baby, how to feed it, how to, do kinds of things. And it was age appropriate for different people. So like I attended a course at like 6 years old or whatever. And I don't remember anything from it, of course, because it was a long time ago. But they did that for me. They did it for my dad. And they did certain things for both of us that was relevant for both of us to know. So, I mean, that is there. Now, granted, like I said, I remember nothing from it. So as far as like what the curriculum was and if it was good or if we should do it more, I couldn't tell you just because I don't remember. But yeah.
But yeah, I figured that's something we can all get behind on the education span, is teaching people who find out they're going to be a parent, or people who want to be a parent, how to, do shit correctly instead of, in a lot of cases, there's some things people never find out until they have a kid, and it's like, that's a thing?
Yeah.
Oh god.
Sometimes not even what a kid, but maybe if they have a few kids, they might figure out by the third one, or they may never figure it out,
which is terrifying. Yeah. It's like, oh, this baby is supposed to be like not screaming its head and throwing shit at me? What?
Yes, you have a quiet, good baby, ma'am. Take your quiet, good baby.
Apparently, I was a
Then what
good
about-
child, but
then
my
what about
sister was
Bob?
not. Apparently, I was
David were
quiet and good and
babies.
behaved, which is interesting considering my parents' background at that time, just their age and things. Meanwhile, you know, you would expect
Same.
my sister to. I mean, we both turned out all right, but you know, early on, we were very opposite of each other.
Same. Like as me and both David and our sister have grown, we're still unique individuals, but there's a lot of things we just kind of done. Like, yeah, this runs in the family. We're all just jaded and dejected about life. Or me and David being the quiet, good babies, and our sister just raising absolute hell. Us
Yep.
bringing her and going, "Where's the off button?
Not much has
Take
changed.
the batteries out." She's still a wild child, but she's
I know.
calmed down.
She's very loud, as David puts it.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Like
All right.
for me to get that loud, I have to get trashed. But before we get off on that side note, anything else, David?
Yeah. Do you have any concluding thoughts, David, or have we kind of addressed everything?
Yeah, pretty much addressed it.
Cool.
Let's put a vacuum cleaner and a hose hanger.
Yeah, it's
In
kind
every
of hard
house.
to say anything more since we've had this conversation a few times.
Yeah, I think
And
this was mostly as thorough a discussion as it could be on this issue. But just as one little thing, I wanted to kind of remind people, as I did at the beginning of the first episode. Again, I would be remiss to have this discussion and leave out assistance for women who are struggling, be it debating having an abortion, struggling to care for a newborn, or anything in between. In the show notes below, there's a link to that has over 20 pro-life resources for women in need of help. If you are interested, and if you're interested in learning more about anything that I've discussed here or that Michael and David have brought up, there's plenty of information for you to dig into in the show notes. So there's plenty of sources for you to fact check us or for you to educate yourself. There's lots of things to look into there.
Yep. Also, it's okay to get help, guys. It's perfectly fine. If you need help, go get it. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered it all. This has been a very lengthy discussion, but I think it's been good to kind of cover everything that we did. Just wrapping up in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of the show. If you have any questions that you would like us to answer, email them to us at facingthegatespod@gmail.com. We want to answer your questions, so send them. If you have any questions related to this episode or any of the other ones that we've discussed, send them our way. We will do a Q&A answer. Q&A session. That would be redundant if we did a Q&A answer. But anyway, that's a thing. So that's our email if you want to get in contact, comments, questions, or concerns. And then also you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the dreaded social media pages that we were talking about that suck, at Facing the Gates. And I think that's about it. And next time we're going to be talking about something else, and it will be just as controversial, but it'll be a good time. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because I just want you to be surprised when it comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all our international viewers, shout out. Just remember, we are in America.
Yeah. Shout out to those South Koreans and the UK people, or UK fam and all the when the show's over, I'm going to release some of the statistics of people who have listened into the show. I don't know if it's, kosher to do that for a podcast, but I really don't care. So I'm just going to release it and people are going to, get to know who they are. Maybe they'll see themselves in the statistics, but yeah, it's interesting. So it's cool to hear or see at least statistically international viewers or listeners.
Like we're not just talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
In an echo chamber.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would say it's been real.
I'd say it's been fun.
It's been real fun. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, depending on what platform you're on. And we'll see you next week.
See you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.